Yashodanandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Rama Rava Kunja Bihari Jaya Rama Rava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yashodanandana Vrajajanarandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Rama Rava Kunja Bihari Rama Rava Kunja Bihari Jaya Rama Rava Kunja Bihari Rama Rava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Nitya Gaura Harimba 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 Nitya Gaura Harimba Nitya Gaura Harimba Shantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Krishna Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Hare Krishna. So for Canto 4, chapter 27, verse number 11, right? Yes.
I'm not sure if the mic is on. It's on the side. Here it is.
Okay. So this is a fairly long purport. So, anyway, nice to hear Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Ije Chakratubhin Gorair
Ije Chakratubir Gorai.
Dikshita Pashumarakai
Dikshita Pashumarakai.
Devam Pitrin Bhutapatin
Devam Pitrin Bhutapati.
Nanakamo Yatha Bhava
Nanakamo Yatha Bhava.
Ije Chakratubhin Gorair
Chakratubir Gorai.
Dikshita Pashumarakai
Dikshita Pashumarakai.
Devam Pitrim Bhutapatin
Devam Pitrin Bhutapati.
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan. Ije Chakratubir Gorai. Ije Chakratubir Gorai. Dikshita Pashumarakai. Dikshita Pashumarakai. Devan Pitrin Bhutapati.
Devam Pitrim Bhutapatin
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan.
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan. Ladies?
Ije Chakratubhir Gorai.
Ije Chakratubhe Gorai
Dikshita Pashumarakai.
Dikshita Pashumarakai
Devan Pitrin Bhutapati.
Devam Pitrim Bhutapate
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan.
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan
Ije Chakratubhir Gorai.
Ije Chakratubhe Gorai
Dikshita Pashumarakai.
Dikshita Pashumarakai
Devan Pitrin Bhutapati.
Devam Pitrim Bhutapate
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan.
Nanakamo Yatha Bhavan Ije he worshipped
He worshipped
Cha
Chakra.
also
Also,
Kratubhi
Kratubir.
by sacrifices
by sacrifice.
Gorhai
Gorai.
ghastly
Ghastly.
Dikshitaha
Dikshita.
inspired
Inspired.
Pashumarakai
Shumar.
wherein poor animals are killed
When 4 animals are killed.
Devan,
Devan,
the demigods,
the demigods,
Pitrin,
Pitrin,
forefathers,
forefathers,
Bhutapatin,
Bhutapatin,
great leaders of human society,
great leaders of human society,
Nana,
Nana,
various,
various,
Kamaha,
Kama,
having desires,
having desires,
Yatha,
Yata,
like,
like,
Bhavan,
Bhavan,
you. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The great sage Narada continued, My dear King Prachina Barhishat, like you, King Puranjana also became implicated in so many desires. Thus he worshipped demigods, forefathers and social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals. Purport. In this verse, the great sage Narada discloses that the character of Puranjana was being described to give lessons to King Prachina Barhishat. Actually, the entire description was figuratively describing the activities of King Prachina Barhishat. In this verse, Narada frankly says, like you, Yatha Bhavan, which indicates that King Puranjana is none other than King Prachina Barhishat himself. Being a great Vaishnava, Narada Muni wanted to stop animal killing sacrifices. He knew that if he tried to stop the king from performing sacrifices, the king would not hear him. Therefore, he is describing the life of Puranjana. But in this verse, he first discloses the intention, although not fully, by saying, like you. Generally, the karmis who are attached to increasing descendants have to perform so many sacrifices and worship so many demigods for future generations, as well as to satisfy so many leaders, politicians, philosophers and scientists to make things go on properly for future generations. The so-called scientists are very eager to see that future generations will live comfortably, and as such they are trying to find different means of generating energy to drive locomotives, cars, airplanes and so on. Now they are exhausting the petroleum supply. These activities are described in the Bhagavad Gita 2.41. Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushakha yanantascha buddhayo vyavasayina. Those who are on the spiritual path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Actually, those who are in knowledge of everything are determined to execute Krishna consciousness, but those who are rascals, mudha, sinners, duskritinaha, and the lowest of mankind, naradhamaha, who are bereft of all intelligence, mayaya parita jnanaha, and who take shelter of the demoniac way of life, asuram bhavam asritaha, are disinterested in Krishna consciousness. As such, they become implicated and take on so many activities. Most of these activities center around the killing of animals. Modern civilization is centered around animal killing. Karmis are advertising that without eating meat, their vitamin value or vitality will be reduced. So to keep oneself fit to work hard, one must eat meat, and to digest meat, one must drink liquor. And to keep the balance of drinking wine and eating meat, one must have sufficient sexual intercourse to keep fit to work very hard like an ass. Wow. There are two ways of animal killing. One way is in the name of religious sacrifices. All the religions of the world, except the Buddhists, have a program for killing animals in places of worship. According to Vedic civilization, the animal eaters are recommended to sacrifice a goat in the temple of Kali under certain restrictive rules and regulations and eat the flesh. Similarly, they are recommended to drink wine by worshipping the goddess Chandika. The purpose is restriction. People have given up all this restriction. Now they are regularly opening wine distilleries and slaughterhouses and indulging in drinking alcohol and eating flesh. A Vaisnava Acharya like Narada Muni knows very well that persons engaged in such animal killing in the name of religion are certainly becoming involved in the cycle of birth and death, forgetting the real aim of life to go home back to Godhead. Thus the great sage Narada, while instructing Srimad Bhagavatam to Vyasa Muni, condemned the karmakanda activities mentioned in the Vedas. Narada told Vyasa, Jugupsitam dharma kritenu shashata svabhava raktasya mahavyatikrama yad vakyato dharma iti tarashtito namanyate tasya nivaranang jana. The people in general are naturally inclined to enjoy, and you have encouraged them in that way in the name of religion. This is verily condemned and is quite unreasonable. Because they are guided under your instructions, they will accept such activities in the name of religion and will hardly care for prohibitions. That's Bhagavatam 1:5-15. Srila Narada Muni chastised Vyasadeva for compiling so many Vedic supplementary scriptures, which are all intended for guiding the people in general. Narada Muni condemned these scriptures because they do not mention direct devotional service. Under Narada's instructions, direct worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, was set forth by Vyasadeva. The conclusion is that neither the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, nor his devotee ever sanctions animal killing in the name of religion. Indeed, Krishna incarnated himself as Lord Buddha to put an end to animal killing in the name of religion. Animal sacrifice under the name of religion is conducted by the influence of tamoguna, the mode of ignorance. As indicated in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 18:31-32, Yaya dharmana dharmang cha karyang cha karyameva cha ayathavat prajanati buddhisa patarajasi adharman dharmang itiya manyate tamashavrita sarvartham viparitang cha buddhisa parhatamasi. That understanding which cannot distinguish between the religious way of life and the irreligious, between action that should be done and action that should not be done, that imperfect understanding, O son of Pritha, is in the mode of passion. That understanding which considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be irreligion under the spell of illusion and darkness, and strives always in the wrong direction, O Partha, is in the mode of ignorance. Those who are involved in the mode of ignorance manufacture religious systems for killing animals. Actually, dharma is transcendental. As Lord Sri Krishna teaches, we must give up all other systems of religion and simply surrender unto Him. Sarvadharma parityajya. Thus, the Lord and His devotees and representatives teach the transcendental dharma, which does not allow animal killing at all. At the present moment, it is the greatest misfortune that in India many so-called missionary workers are spreading irreligion in the name of religion. They claim an ordinary human being to be God and recommend meat eating for everyone, including so-called sannyasis. Wow. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Para Krishna Prashta Bhutale Shrimadabir Krishna Rashkoshaminiti Namine. Okay, let's look at the verse one more time and then the purport. Yeah. The great sage Narada continued, My dear King Prachina Barhishat, like you, King Puranjana also became implicated in so many desires. Thus he worshipped demigods, forefathers and social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals. So, first point, I made some notes, is that even the greatest teacher, and arguably Narada, is the ultimate guru, because just look at the list of his students. I mean, his students include some of the greatest Vaisnavas and saints of all time, and he is their guru. So, he's the predominant teacher of all teachers, like for all times, has a very unique position. So consider this, even Narada when he has somebody as a student who is not really like into hearing his message, has to figure out the means how to capture the attention of this person. I mean, even Narada cannot just go straight forward to somebody and expect, yes, because I'm Narada, so I assume you are going to hear. No, what he's doing here, he's starting with this long allegory, and at this point now he's saying, giving a hint. By the way, O king, the king here, Puranjana, is like you. So, because now he knows at this point he has captured the king's attention. He has heard attentively, and now he's kind of in the position of giving the heavy teaching that, you know, this story is in fact about you. I'm talking about you here, not just in general sense. So that's the first point. Anyone who wants to teach, share sacred knowledge with others has to start by considering, how will I capture the attention of the people? In ancient Greece, there was one philosopher, teacher. I don't right now exactly recall his name, but he did things to upset people. Once he stood up, people were eating dinner. He just stood up in the midst of the table, and we finally were looking like, what's going on? And then he's giving the teaching. I'm not suggesting that try this next time you are eating dinner with your friends and family and stand up and, you know, now everyone is going to hear Bhagavad Gita. That's not the point. The point is, somehow or other you need to figure out the means how to capture the attention of the audience, because only after that can you start teaching. Before capturing the attention, it's in fact, you can give the best lecture in the world, but nobody is interested, and it will essentially be in vain. So even Narada is doing that. He's showing by example that whoever's in the position of teaching, sharing knowledge, should just not go straight away and, you know, I'm hitting you in the head with Bhagavad Gita and you just surrender. It doesn't work that way. And why does it not work in that way? Because you know, bhakti particularly, and spiritual life in general, is about transformation of heart. That's what is the real aim. Like, to have a change of heart, to change people's hearts from the spirit of exploitation to the spirit of contribution, from the spirit of taking to the spirit of giving, and from the mode of I'm the center of everything, figuring out that, hey, I'm not the center, in fact someone else is the center, the position is already taken. That's a very deepest possible transformation that anyone can undergo. And because it's on the paper it's easy, you just change your attitude, but because we are essentially programmed, every cell in our biological system is programmed into, you know, self-preservation, grabbing to life no matter what, and somehow or other protecting our own tiny little self against all threats, and meanwhile also trying to grab into any little tiny specks of enjoyment that might be available, because it's so deeply programmed. So theoretically you can go out and interview people, like let's take a mic and like the radio program, go to the streets of Zurich and ask people, dear sir, what's your answer to this? I have only one question. Are you the center of the universe or are you not? I think most people would say, yeah, I'm not. But then what's going on in the daily life? The person wakes up and, yeah, I'm waking up when I'm hearing the sound of my alarm clock, and then I go to my bathroom to brush my teeth and take my shower, and then I put on my clothes, and then I go to my downstairs and eat my breakfast and meet my family members. Then I go to my work and have my work day, and then I go back to my home. Like, who is the center of this story here? Like, you know, it's deeply programmed, so it's not an easy thing to undergo such a change, to even come to a point of questioning the fact that, yeah, I'm the center. just to have this question mark, maybe not. It's quite an achievement, in fact. So Narada is taking this task very seriously, and here he says here's a person who is like has the capacity of hearing and understanding, but at the present moment the person is kind of under the influence of ignorance, to put it mildly. So the next point is like, what is the structure of ignorance? Okay, so ignorance starts by branching off. It doesn't stay just in the mode of ignorance. It gets, pure ignorance needs something to be played out. So the next manifestation of ignorance is ahankara, because everyone is a pure unit of consciousness, pure soul, eternal servant of God. However, when that gets covered by ignorance, the sense of I'm a person, I'm a subject, that doesn't disappear. So it needs a new place to be projected. So ahankara means I create another identity, a false identity. So then there's identification with the body and with the mind. Now when that takes place, then the ignorance further branches off, because it's natural for the self to be happy. We are all happiness-seeking entities, right? So disagreement amongst the various philosophies and religions, ways of life is just, where can we locate happiness? Where can we find the greatest happiness? Everyone agrees that we should be happy. Now, under the influence of ignorance and identification with the body, then the next step is to seek happiness by two ways, and these are called raga and dvesha. So raga means I want to experience again something that was pleasant that I experienced before. Now the source of raga, that can develop in two ways. It can develop by, okay, something I did before. Let's say I ate ice cream, or let's say I visited a beautiful place, or I had a nice interaction with another person. And then I want to try to do that again. So that's called raga. Now the other one is by advertisement. So there's something you did not do before, at least not in this lifetime, but then you see an advertisement and like there's a naked person advertising chocolate, and then like, yeah, it seems like a good idea. You never ate that particular brand of chocolate before, but somehow it's laid out like it's made very attractive, that this particular brand, let me taste it. So a desire may develop. You never tasted it before in this particular lifetime, but by advertisement it gets activated. So then desire starts manifesting, yeah, gotta have it, there's no other way. Okay, there's a particular department of advertisement, it's called religious advertisement. So that is related to, in this verse, when Srila Prabhupada is referring to Bhagavad Gita 2.41. Vyavasaya yatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahusakha yanandascha buddhaya vyavasaya nam. So what is constructed like one-pointed intellect and then many branch intellect. Now this is given in Bhagavad Gita in the same section where Krishna is also condemning the understanding about Vedas which deal with the three modes. So you have many desires, and here are these sacred texts which are kind of explaining you have many desires, these are the means how you can fulfill these many desires. And it's well known that some of the sacred texts, whether in Vedic tradition and other traditions, are in fact giving this kind of a religious advertisement that, hey, even the best enjoyment in this planet is a tiny little speck of enjoyment compared to if you manage to go to a heavenly world. So it's kind of advertising that. And so basically material desire in the form of raga, like I have to have this and that enjoyment, then it can take many forms. Even in this lifetime, advertisement from television, or even within the so-called religious life, like, okay, let me go to a better world and enjoy in the heaven and burn good karma really fast and effectively. Okay, so that's raga. And then there's another manifestation of ignorance, which is the opposite of raga. That's called dvesha. So somehow or other, the mind is very allergic to the experience of pain? Well, I suppose it's for a good reason, because that helps us to stay alive. So to some extent we need it. It's dvesa, which when we walk in the street and then a car is coming with great speed, it's dvesa which tells us, now you need to jump off, don't stay here, because otherwise you'll be killed in the next 2 seconds. So we need raga and dvesa, but they don't give us satisfaction. They just help us to stay alive. That's their purpose. But when we institute them as like, okay, this is what will give the ultimate fulfillment in life, then it just leads to frustration. Because, okay, dvesa, what's going on in dvesa is that there's pain approaching, or maybe it's going on right now, mosquito is biting me. Or maybe I read in a weather forecast that it will be bad weather after 3 hours, whatever. This is not what I read, in fact, it's just an example. Whatever it is, or this person is approaching now, and last time I met this person, we ended up in an argument, so I better avoid the person now. So dvesa is like the part of our mind which tells, okay, you better avoid the situation, or you better destroy this, because this is giving you pain or suffering, whether it's mild or intensive. Okay, and then this fifth, the number 5 on this list, ignorance manifests as ahankara, and then it's raga and dvesa. And there's a 5th way ignorance can be categorized as fear of death. And because oftentimes we kind of manage to brush the idea of death below a carpet, so to speak, then we are concerned about so many other things. But essentially it's always traceable back to the fact that we want to cling to life and we are afraid that it will end one day. So this is how ignorance manifests. And then because 2 of these 5, namely dvesa and fear, are unpleasant feelings, and because they are all around us, it's no wonder that people throughout the history of the universe have figured out all sorts of ways how to keep these 2, dvesa and fear, somehow away from sight. Now, one particular vicious way of keeping the unpleasant experience away and trying to cling to happiness and raga and to have nice experiences is when violence gets instituted. When violence gets institutionalized. So this is particularly was the focus of this purport and this verse, is that the king in this story, Puranjana, but then the king in real life, Prachina Barhisat, the common feature of both of them is that they were engaged in taking the lives of animals, and not only once or twice. Both of them, in fact, were engaged in as a regular process of taking the lives of animals. So there's something particular vicious about that, because, okay, ignorance is there, and we can ask, what else is new? Because that's everyone. Even spiritual practitioners, one of the main things that is going on day in and day out, we have to deal with ignorance and engage in all sorts of practices to kind of reduce the influence of ignorance. So spiritual life, spiritual practice can be analyzed in such a way. So that's going on anyway, everywhere, all the time. But when it gets particularly dense is when we, under ignorance, seek happiness with a process where we are causing harm to others. That's really the worst kind. And the worst, when that gets really intense, is when it becomes ordinary. Means it's not something that takes place, let's say, once a year I do an evil act, or maybe once and every 10 years. I mean, even that is bad. I'm not saying that it's not bad. Like, you murder another person once is enough. That's really bad. But what is going on here is that, okay, let's develop a lifestyle and a whole culture where that becomes something which takes place every day. Because when something takes place every day, then it ceases to shock one. The shock value is gone. Because sometimes you do something really bad and then it shocks you. And then you can repent. Oh, I should not have done that. And then you can learn the lesson because you feel bad. But when you do something routinely, on a daily basis, then it's okay, that's ordinary. Every day I wake up, I brush my teeth, I drink a cup of coffee, and then I kill some animals. You know, if it's like going on a daily basis, then it's kind of one becomes thick-skinned regarding that, and then it just goes on and on and on, and then the ignorance really gets deep. So it's harmful for the society, for everyone, for others, and it's very harmful for the person, him or herself, who is perpetuating that kind of activity. So in spiritual practice, anyone wants to make spiritual progress, there are three components that need to be considered. What are the three features that need to be in place for spiritual practice to be very effective? So first of all, just let's analyze what any yogi would be doing, including bhakti yogis, but particularly bhakti yogis. So how do you recognize a good sadhana? So first is like you're doing it every day, on a regular basis, right? You wouldn't really call it a sadhana if this is something like, yeah, I do it occasionally, every Sunday I chant around, every month. Or whenever I feel like that, then I read Bhagavatam. That's like, it's good, it's inspirational, but that's not really sadhana. Sadhana means like you are doing it on a daily basis, at least on a daily basis, on a more advanced level many times a day. And on the most advanced level, you wake up and you go to bed, and all those waking hours are spent in spiritual practice. That's super advanced. That's like on the level of the most elevated devotees. But at least on a daily basis, it has to be regular. Okay. Now, even if it's regular, and let's say you go to a retreat or you go to a pilgrimage and you make a vow, let me chant, let me do japa, let me read Bhagavad Gita every day for 1 month. And then I go home and life continues as usual. Now, how much impact does that have? It certainly has some impact, because now you spent 1 whole month dedicated in the practice. But however, if all you do after that is totally opposite to that, so the benefit is like, yeah, you have implanted the samskara and you can continue in the next lifetime, but just from the point of view of completing the process, this will not lead anyone into the destination, or probably not, unless the third component is there. So there's 3 components of very serious spiritual practice. So I have mentioned 2 of them. Regular, and then you have to do it for a long time. So the example of doing for 1 month means it's the opposite of long time. 1 month is usually, unfortunately, not enough. I wish it was, but my own experience is like sometimes I spend some really intense weeks and months, and still it feels like, yeah, it was good, worthwhile, gave some special inspiration. But still, in most cases, one really better be prepared for a lifelong practice, so a long time. But number 3, even if you practice every day, you chant 2 hours of japa, you read Bhagavatam, you go to the temple, you associate with devotees, you do everything for your whole life, it's still possible not to get anywhere. How is that? If your heart is not in the place. Okay? So we all know there are offenses against chanting of the holy name, right? There are 10 of them. I find it fascinating. I think this, at least Bhaktivinoda Thakur is mentioning that. I don't know the original source, maybe one of you knows. But there's a list of 10 offenses, how you can offend the process of chanting the holy names of God so that you are deriving very little, if any, benefit. But then it's saying, and it's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. So if you add that one, then it becomes 11. It's not 10. That's number 11. However, inattention while one is chanting is in fact really vicious, because it's so easy and it's not a big deal. Like, I can do it every day and be like a little casual about it, but who cares? Like, if you're a little bit inattentive, nothing happens. It's not that the sky falls on your head and you'll be dead. Nothing dramatic happens. The point is, it's so ordinary and it's easy to get carried away by being inattentive. But when you are inattentive, it means your heart is not in the practice. It's elsewhere. So my fingers are with the beads and my mouth is with the holy names, but my heart is in Netflix. So what will be the outcome? Are you developing Krishna consciousness or Netflix consciousness? And usually it's either or. Unless, of course, Netflix comes with a show which is all about Krishna, to be seen. So far, not yet. The heart needs to be in place. So this one factor, being intensely devoted, what if I don't feel any devotion in my heart? Just being autobiographical at the moment. So then what you can do, however, if the devotion is not flowing from the heart to all directions spontaneously, and smelling the tulasi leaf will cause eruptions in the body and hairs of body standing on end and collapsing in the ground, and that sort of stuff. If that's not happening, what we have the capacity of doing is to pay attention. That we have. And that's the way of manifesting devotion, when the devotion is not manifesting like in terms of elevated spiritual emotions. Then just pay attention. That's the way of placing the heart in the right place. So like when these three components are in place, then the spiritual practice will be powerful, it will be effective, it will bring result. Like doing it regularly for a long time and being present, being attentive, giving your heart, giving whatever it is. We all have our 100% to give. And Krishna is not asking more than that, but also, so it's also that, we should aim at giving the 100% that we have in our own particular way. So now, if this is the key to success in spiritual life, then the reverse of it will be the key of diving really deep into ignorance. You just reverse it. So what is going on here? The verse is talking about killing animals on a regular basis for a long time and being intensely devoted to that, because he's saying, he worshipped demigods, forefathers and social leaders. The first word in this verse, ije, worship. I mean, worship, we don't really call worship when somebody is, driving a car. Worship is a special act. It's like I'm deliberately now showing reverence to someone. There's something serious about worship. So Puranjana here in the story kills animals on a regular basis, and there's an element of worship. He's putting his heart on it. It's like, this will bring something, a really good result. So dedication to ignorance is being described in this verse. So that's why it's particular vicious. So now, this is like, when you interpret scriptures, there are two modes of interpreting scriptures. One is now using the Western theological terminology. One is called exegesis. Exegesis means let's try to figure out what does this mean in its original context. Okay? So if you jump into a time machine, go back in time 5,000 years, when Bhagavatam was spoken and being discussed, or even more, because Narada is talking to Prachina Barhisat who knows when, I don't know, maybe some of you can figure out the Puranic scale. It could be hundreds of millions of years ago. That's less important here. But in its original context, so far discussion has been approximately what did it mean back then. Now the next step is what does it mean now? So that's called hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is now trying to bring it into our day. So in our day, it's even though Srila Prabhupada is saying in the purport, and it's true what he's saying, that in all religions, he's excluding Buddhism here, there's some kind of process of causing violence to animals in the name of religion. And that's really bad, because when it's religiously sanctioned, then it brings in the aura of sanctity. Hey, this is our sacred act. It's sacred to kill. I mean, that's really the worst possible scenario. But then coming to the secular world, what if it's the case that we manage to find a person who is not religiously inclined? It shouldn't be that difficult today. You just go out and start stopping people. And there are differences between countries, but still being secular is now emerging as a mainstream option in quite a few places. There are some countries in Europe today where there are more people who self-identify as non-religious compared to those who identify as religious. Many places 50-50. But even if it's 70% religion, 30% secular, it's worthwhile considering what would this verse and purport mean in those contexts. Because for these people, then sacrificing animals, making it a sacred act, is not really an option. But still, eating meat is an option. So when you remove the aura of sanctity, this is our sacred act, this is how we practice religion, we kill other living entities. If that is removed, but when it's replaced by cultural norm, it's culturally normal to just eat meat. Okay, so you are not, it's not your sacrifice exactly, but it's normal. So what is going on here now? Now you have two of the three important components of being really deeply in ignorance. You are doing on a regular basis, and you are doing it throughout your life, and you are not really questioning it. So even if it's not really sacred act, but it's a normal act. And when an evil act becomes normalized, then the problem, particularly vicious feature of this, it's very easy to spread everywhere, because it's normal. It doesn't shock anyone. So the fact that evil can be so normal that it ceases to shock people. There's an example of this in the recent, previous century. After the Second World War, then there were these trials against war criminals. And one of those, probably the best known of the trials, was the Eichmann trial. Anyone knows about that? Yeah. So Eichmann was like an officer in the Nazi Germany. And his job was as part of the bureaucracy to just send people to death camp. And then during that trial, then his defense was, yeah, but I was doing exactly what I was told to do. That was his defense. In other words, what I was doing was normal. Everyone was doing that. And then there's a well-known report of the trial. There's a philosopher, Hannah Arendt, wrote about it to New York Times about this particular trial. And one of the expressions that she used was the banality of evil. And banal means it's ordinary. But her point was that when it becomes so ordinary, then it becomes possible to culturally institutionalize that everywhere, because no one is paying attention, everyone is doing that. So these are some of the ideas related to this verse. So either within the context of religion, you bring it under the umbrella, okay, this is religiously sanctioned, but it's particularly bad if evil acts become religiously sanctified, because then you bring the aura of sanctity. Religion is meant to solve the problems of life, and now it becomes a means to perpetuate the problems or even make things worse. Or the other one is outside of religion, but when something like that, prime example is eating meat and then drinking alcohol, when these become normalized, then it ceases to be a big deal, and because it's normal, then it's normal to be under the ignorance, and when it's normal, then it becomes really difficult to come to a point to question that. But it's necessary to question that, and it's very difficult to question something which everyone is doing all the time throughout the history. Okay, so this is analysis of the problems, and it's interesting. You look at the society today, and it looks like, yeah, it's pretty bad. But here's Narada Muni speaking to Prachina Barhisat, who is a king of a state in previous times, a better yuga. This is not a Kali Yuga description, this is another yuga, more elevated time. So it seems like these themes, these are perennial. It's not that we are having a bad time now, this is Kali Yuga, and previously it was so much better. It seems like these problems are part of the human condition. So the blessing in this particular age, of course, we know, is Sankirtan Yagya, and there's really no other way. Like going through the process of Vedic rituals and sacrifices or practicing yoga for tens of thousands of years, that's really hard because people don't live tens of thousands of years, so it takes many lifetimes in that case. But the particular blessing is that now we can derive the benefits of all sacrifices from previous ages just by assembling together and paying attention to glorification of the holy names of the Lord and hearing his message in the form of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with those who are dedicated to the same, honoring prasadam, and then paying homage to the deity form of the Lord in a sacred place, like such as the temple. None of these acts require like a fundamental change in the lifestyle, even though that could be part of that. In fact, these things are, technically speaking, very easy, but they have the power of transforming the heart, so that even under the age of Kali, when ignorance tends to get institutionalized, becomes very ordinary and is everywhere, to such an extent that it's difficult to even to notice it, because it's everywhere. Even in such dense age of darkness, it's possible to find the light of spirit by taking shelter of the Sankirtan movement. So, Hare Krishna. Do you have any questions, comments, counter-arguments? Yes?
Thank you, Jayananda Prabhu. It was a very structured and insightful discourse. I had a couple of questions, but because of the paucity of time, I'll stick to one. Towards the end, you mentioned how you took us through a journey of different kind of practices and these three components, etc. And then towards the end, you mentioned how adopting these changes do not really require a fundamental change in our life. That's something you mentioned. And I'm just thinking, of course, when we go and we say this to somebody outside, it is a fundamental change for them. And also I was thinking for our own practice, like I really appreciated how you brought up this point on inattention, this lack of attention that you spoke about. And sometimes I really, when I introspect, I think it's so deep-rooted in my life, inattention, especially when chanting. So it does need a fundamental change. So maybe you could clarify what your approach meant.
Yeah, because on one hand I seem to be saying that it doesn't require fundamental change, but on the deeper level it does require. So, yes. So what I meant is, like, you can get started. I mean, anyone can join a kirtan, anyone can honor prasadam, So it's not that first you have to go to a seminary and study for 3 years to do these things. Like that I meant, like usually, let's say you want to have an advanced degree, let's say in physics. So you start at the first grade and the process is completed when you are 25. So it means like 20 years of intense, increasingly intense investment on that. And then you come to the level of understanding how the nuclear physics actually work. It's just an example. You could just take, let's say playing violin, the same thing. You want to play the most beautiful music, it's like a lifetime dedication. So in the same way, to come to the perfection of bhakti is something similar, but at the same time there's something very interesting about planting the samskaras, spiritual samskaras, which is like, you have, samskara means you have some content in your mind and that gets stored. Now when spiritual content gets stored, all you need is to taste prasadam and not hate it. And that's pretty easy. That's my experience at least. I suppose somebody could be like so like used to some other kind of food that this is like no. I've heard stories like that, but it's rare. Or going to kirtan, like I conducted kirtan programs where self-confessed atheists, people who are in charge of the local atheist organization, come to the kirtan and say, yeah, but this is fun. Maybe the philosophy is not really my philosophy, but you know. So the point is that there's something about planting spiritual samskaras, which obviously we know it starts with agyata sukriti. So on the first level it's easy. All you need is you don't reject it. And then it goes into the subconscious mind. And when it goes to the subconscious mind, then things start happening. So usually when you do the ordinary yoga, let's say Patanjali yoga, where you're progressing from one samadhi to another, to another, to another, and finally you come to the samadhi where the mind is shut off. So the consciousness remains in its own nature. Only at that point in the subconscious level, cleansing process starts. You start doing away with the deep-rooted ignorance in the subconscious mind. It doesn't happen before that. That's why it's called a difficult process. So, I mean, temporarily, on the daily basis, you are doing the practice. On that day, you will be peaceful. But still, it's like the famous elephant bathing. You go bathing, then you come back to the sand and you are again dirty. This is not the case with bhakti yoga. When you plant a spiritual samskara, it's there forever. It's too late. Your material life is spoiled now because you just appreciated prasadam one time. So in that sense it's easy. Then to complete it, yes, you need a fundamental change, but to get started is like to get some kind of foothold in the process seems to be much easier compared to other process. And also like you can get started without changing your lifestyle. That's one of the to me, one of the central messages of Bhagavad Gita, and I just heard yesterday somebody formulate it in a very beautiful way on a lecture. As an Indian devotee called, I think Govinda is his name, he said that the classic yoga is like world-renouncing, whereas, how did he put it? Krishna's teaching in Bhagavad Gita is life-affirming. You know, you are doing it in your life. Doesn't mean, if you have family, you don't have to leave your family. Whereas in the other system, you in fact have at one point to walk away in order to make it. Let's say you have a job. Now in this process, you don't have to leave your job. In fact, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, don't leave your job. Bring the spirituality into your job. Just put it in contemporary language. Let's say you have hobbies. Okay, now we are coming to a really controversial area. But people are known to have hobbies. Now what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? In the chapter where he's talking about Ashtanga Yoga, that's the 6th chapter, he's saying one should be regulated even in recreation. So it's a separate discussion what is recreation for one and for another. But you need to have that. So Krishna is recognizing that. So basically he's saying that you can have a normal human life and also be spiritual. So compared to all other processes, that's easy. Now, on another level, as you pointed out, you're quite right, I'm happy you're bringing this up, it's about the most fundamental transformation of heart. So it's one way, it's the most difficult thing to go all the way. But what else is new? So, yeah, so